Hey guys, Pete here. This is going to be my full recap and review for Twin Peaks Season 3, Episode 10, Laura is the One. If you're not caught up, this is your spoiler warning. This will spoil everything up until Part 10 of Twin Peaks The Return. I'm going to do a scene by scene first and then a discussion about things after, so there will be a timestamp link in the description if you want to skip over the scene by scene. So we start out in Twin Peaks itself, or somewhere on the outskirts, I would guess, and we see Richard pull up at a trailer that we eventually find out is Miriam. He has a beat-up car, has some different color panels on it, so we can see that he's not living a high lifestyle as a result of his drug dealing. But he comes up to the door, calls her name. She wants him to go away, and she says that she has already told the cops that he killed the little kid, but she doesn't know why he's not been arrested yet. So she mailed a letter to Sheriff Truman, and he wants to know about that. And it turns out she mailed it that day. So he goes into a rage, busts the front door, gets inside. We don't see what happens in there, but he hits her with something, it looks like. Then we see him light a candle after he turns on the oven, and he leaves, and he calls Deputy Chad, on the way out. He tells him he needs him to intercept that letter. Chad seems pretty much like Chad always does, kind of sounds bothered by the fact that he's even calling him, but he agrees to do it. And it's interesting that when they pan down on the body of Miriam, she was definitely still breathing. There's also, I guess he's trying to blow up the trailer, but he also kicked out the door, so there would be ventilation there. A lot of people have mentioned she may not die, but she's also out in the middle of nowhere, so who knows, you know what I mean? But he may have botched the murder, we don't know for sure. Then we get a nice little transition scene where Harry Dean Stanton's Carl Rod is playing Red River Valley on the guitar. It's cool. I mentioned it in the top moments video, so I won't go into it too much here, but yeah, it was awesome. And then we hear Steven and Becky fighting, but what we see is really just Steven yelling at her and her kind of rolled up in a ball on the couch. We don't see him hit her, but it's obvious that he's pretty unhinged. She said something, from what I can gather, she said something about what he does or what he's doing, because he's going on about how much money she makes, why she doesn't ask for a raise. And then he says, I know exactly what you did, but we don't know for sure what they're talking about. After that, we see Rodney Mitchum in his living room, I guess it is. He's doing some paperwork from the surveillance at the casino, signing off on stuff. Candy comes in, chasing a fly, and I've already talked about this in the top moments, but she's a trip. I don't know what's going on with her. We'll talk more about her later, I guess, but yeah, she's following a fly around. She ends up hitting him in the face with a remote control, and this is a source of trauma. It draws some blood, and Jim Belushi, who plays the brother Mitchum, comes in. And yeah, it just sort of sets the tone of us not knowing what the hell is going on with the showgirls that follow these two around. They're obviously in their employ, but we don't really know, one, why they wear showgirl outfits all the time, and two, why they have such strange personalities. From there, we go to the doctor's office, and the doctor is surprisingly uninterested in the changes that have happened with Dougie since the last time he saw him. Dougie Coop is obviously in a lot better shape than the original Dougie Jones was, so his wife, Janie E., takes notice of this, and this is another thing I talked about before, but it's still funny to watch. I just rewatched it, and the way that she gets that little twist of her lips there is just hilarious. So yeah, nothing really happens of note at the doctor's office. He doesn't see the bullet hole that, Agent Cooper should have. He doesn't want to check to see if there's something wrong with his brain. He just sends him on his way as far as we know. We do find out, though, that Agent Cooper has perfect blood pressure. Next, we go back to Ben and Rodney Mitchum's place. We can see that Candy has not recovered from the traumatic experience of hitting Rodney in the face. She's bawling. She's inconsolable. He eventually turns on the television, and they see that Ike the Spike has been arrested. Ben mentions that they can save a bunch of money now because they have a hit on Ike, if they can call it off. They also notice Dougie Coop from the surveillance camera footage from the casino, and now they know who he is. We also see we see that these guys are vicious guys, but then we also see this weird side where Candy says, "How can you ever love me after what I did?" And we can see that they kind of just put up with it. Like we don't know why or what's going on, but it's interesting to note, I think. But we get the replay of Janie E's description on the television, and that's pretty funny. And Cooper cracks me up because he goes to touch the badge, and I don't know why, but I found this hilarious. Next, we go back to the Joneses' house, and we can see that the trip to the doctor's office has really gotten Janie E going. This is hilarious because she's super into it, and she asks, like, am I attractive? Do you find me attractive? And he's eating a chocolate cake, like a piece of chocolate cake, and I don't know, it's really funny. The Dougie stuff in this episode was actually really good. And he obviously doesn't respond. When she says, I think you're attractive, he just goes back to eating the cake. And it's pretty classic all the way around. Eventually she gets him upstairs. They have a pretty intense sex scene where Dougie Coop is pretty much flapping his arms and enjoying himself. Janie E is definitely enjoying herself as well. They wake up Sonny Jim, and everybody seems to, except for probably Sonny Jim, everyone seems to have enjoyed this little session. We have our first visit with Dr. Jacoby in a while, or should I say Dr. Amp. He is ranting about the government. I just watched again and was trying to find out if there was anything really specific, but it seems just like he is pissed. And I don't know that we're supposed to take anything else away from that, except for that he is really pissed off at the government. He talks about a lot of different things, and we see Nadine is watching from her Run Silent, Run Drapes shop. When I first saw this, I was like, oh, she's successful, but I guess when we think about it, it's not really guaranteed because she has a shop that she's successful. She did get her idea off the ground, though. That much is clear. There's a weird display out front where it automatically opens and closes the drapes so that you can see one of Jacoby's golden shovels. And yeah, I'm not sure what the trajectory of these two characters are, but she is absolutely mesmerized by him, and he's basically just angry at the man, for lack of any better way to describe it. After that, we go back to the Joneses, and we see them leaving the house in the morning. Janie E is still very pleased with Dougie Coop from the last evening, and she steals a little moment to give him a kiss and tell him she's still thinking about it. He still pretty much looks the same to me. I don't notice any major change from what happened there, but we don't get to see much of him either. They just sort of sneak a kiss and then go off to the car. We find out that Jerry is still out in the woods. He's still wearing the same clothes. They show the same background scene that they showed last time, but I'm not sure that means anything about where he's at currently. I mean, it's a mountain, so he could be anywhere where you could see that. We see that he is trying to do something with his phone, but he has no service, and he's really frustrated, and he screams, "You can't fool me, I have been here before." Then we go back over to the Twin Peaks Sheriff Department, and Chad comes up front. Lucy asks him what he's doing there, and they make small talk about what a beautiful day it is, or at least he attempts to make small talk about that. Lucy sort of rambles a strange thing about time and about once her and Andy had thought that the clock had stopped, but then they realized they didn't even know what time it was, and then the mailman starts to come, so Chad cuts it off and goes outside. He intercepts the mail. The mailman thinks this is weird because he's waiting for him to drive away. Lucy's trying to sort of spy on the situation and see what's going on, but he finds a letter that he thinks is the right one, hides it in his shirt pretty good, and then comes back inside, takes another donut, and walks away. Whether he got the right one or not isn't clear. I'll talk about that later, but as far as what we saw, he grabbed the letter that he was looking for. We get a quick scene of Richard Horne driving, and he gets the text message from Chad saying that it's done. And then we go over to the house where we saw Johnny run and crash his head into the wall. We find out that he's okay, more or less, but he's restrained in a chair, wearing a helmet, and he has this bear with sort of a robot-y kind of head on top of it, and it just says, "Hello, Johnny, how are you today?" over and over again. Now, I read that this face on this is related to something else that David Lynch did. I haven't seen it, but a lot of people have brought that up. But basically, he just sits there, and I guess the bear calms him down in some way or another. He never answers the question, obviously, but that's what he's doing. Then we hear over the intercom that Richard is pulling up. Silvia tries to stop him from coming in, but that's not really going to work. And we get this brutal scene where he chokes her, threatens her, gets the combination to her safe, takes all of the money and everything else of value in the house, puts it in her purse, and takes off. Johnny is upset and trying. As soon as he comes in, Johnny reacts, but obviously he's restrained, so there's nothing he can do. We see that his jaw looks to be wired shut, like he broke his jaw. Silvia mentions that Ben won't give him money anymore, his grandfather. So we see that Richard's a pretty horrible human being all the way across the board. It's a rough scene to watch. Johnny's bear in the background makes things even more eerie and tense. But Richard makes off with some loot, and we see Silvia go to Johnny on the floor. After that, we head to Las Vegas. We see Duncan Todd in his office. His assistant Roger comes in to tell him that it is true, that it's all over the news. Ike the Spike has been caught. We see that Tony Anthony Sinclair is there. Todd calls him over. We find out a couple interesting things here. Primarily that now it is Tony's responsibility to go convince the Mitchum brothers that Dougie Jones is the reason that they lost that insurance claim for $30 million. And to get them riled up by saying that Dougie has a vendetta against them so that they'll take care of Dougie themselves. The other thing is he mentions that insurance claim that we conspired to shut down. So Duncan refers to the Mitchums as his competitors and bitterest rivals, but we don't exactly know what that means. But we do know that Tony helped him do something dirty, and now he's going to have to do this or else. In no uncertain terms, Mr. Todd says that he'll have to kill Dougie himself. You get a quick sequence and see that Albert is out on a date with Constance, the coroner. They seem to be having a great time, and Gordon and Tammy are looking in, and they are enjoying it as well. So it's a cute scene. We don't really find out anything. They're looking from a distance, so we can't hear what they're talking about, but it looks like they're just having a normal date and that they're really enjoying each other's company. We return to the Silver Mustang Casino, and we see Tony Sinclair has arrived in the security cameras. The Mitchums send Candy to go pick him up and bring him back, and it is pretty hilarious. At first, she doesn't answer, and I'm not sure if it's because Rodney's saying her name, and then she doesn't answer until Ben does or whatever, but yeah, so she goes, and we see this all in the security camera. We see it from, like, their perspective, and we see them in the frame, so she gets down there, and it's like a full minute and 5 seconds of her doing this stuff, like she's moving her hands around and pointing places and doing different things, before they break and they call down and say, "Get her up here." Both of their faces are hilarious. Watching her is hilarious. And it's a really great scene. I underappreciated it the first time I watched it for sure. So anyways, he gets in there, they talk, he does what he's there to do. He tells them that it was actually Dougie Jones that has the vendetta. They don't give much up. They pretty much listen and say, "Is that it?" and have him go. He sort of drives the point home because he doesn't obviously want to kill Dougie himself. And then when they go home, in the next scene, we see that they are very moved by the information. This pair is awesome. I mean, this is a really cool thing here when they're talking. The acting is really good. And it's funny as well because what it comes down to is they want to have Dougie, they want to have a meeting with him. They mention how much money they're out because of him, not only for the insurance, but for the casino winnings. But then Ben Jim Belushi says, "You fuck us once, shame on us. You fuck us twice, shame on you, you're dead." So yeah, it was cool. From there, we head on over to Gordon Cole's hotel room. He's drawing a nice little illustration there. That still makes me laugh every time I see it. And he hears a knock on his door, so he goes over. And when he opens it, he sees Laura Palmer. Not like she's actually there, but he sees her image. This is a clip from when she went over to Donna's to ask her if they were best friends. Like, Donna, are you my best friend? It's really interesting. It's put together in an interesting way. There's a lot of layers to the sound. It sounds like, there's some music playing. There's some sounds from that original Run stuff. And there could be some other background noises there. I don't know. That sounds like some popping whenever I'm listening to it. But that image fades away and we see Albert there. He kind of takes a look back to make sure there's not something behind him because of Gordon's look. But he comes inside. He has info on Diane. Her phone picked up a text message that morning. It's the one that we saw, around the dinner table. The conversation is lively one. He explains to Gordon that they thought, since it came from a Philadelphia cell tower, that it was probably one of her boyfriends. But she responded saying, they have Hastings. He's going to lead them to the site. This was an encrypted message, so they look closer at the cell tower chain and realize that it came from Mexico to the Philadelphia tower. Gordon says, I felt it when she hugged me, and this confirms it, but we don't really 100% know what he means there. I mean, the easy assumption is that he's saying that he knew she was on the other side, but I don't think we could jump to that conclusion just yet. I think we need more information. I'm not even sure who that text came from, like we talked about before. So anyways, as they're doing that, Tammy comes to the door. She has news from the investigation on the glass box and murders in New York City. And she has this photograph that has Evil Coop. It's from the early cards from the recordings of that place. And he's talking to a mysterious person who I have no idea who it is. People brought up why wasn't this part of the moments, mainly because I have no idea who he is. He's not someone we've seen before, and I don't have much clues. I mean, obviously he looks to be involved with setting up this space, so that leads you kind of to the search for the Zone website and some of the stuff that was on there. And honestly, the best theory I've heard about this was that it is the other person mentioned on the website. It says that the site is put together by Bill Hastings primarily, but every once in a while this guy Heinrich Wiegel contributes. There's no noticeable contributions from him on there, and he's really an enigma, and that's why this is a good theory, because he's a name that we've heard. There's stuff on that website that is relatable to what's going on in New York, and that's really it. We know nothing about him, and we know nothing about the guy in the picture. So it could be that guy, but it could be anybody else at the same time. So it's definitely interesting, mysterious, and confusing. Gordon just says this is really something, and there's not a lot of overt clues there as to what else is going on. Some people have mentioned that he thought it was a third person there, but I only see two. I think there's some cables or some other sort of thing next to him that just kind of looks like there's another person there. After that, we see Ben Horne getting a call from Silvia about what happened. We notice that Silvia no longer lives at the Great Northern, but this kind of shows that they are separated. He's still wearing his wedding ring in the scene, but she's talking about him replacing the money. He says he's not going to send her anymore. So there's that back and forth. And then whenever he gets off the phone, he says to Beverly, will you have dinner with me? So he's kind of lost his resolve not to fool around with her. After that, we get the log lady and her message for Hawk. I went through this whole thing in the Top Moments video, so I'm not going to repeat the whole thing here. I've been thinking about it the last couple of days, and if the timeline is the same, I'm guessing that this has something to do with what's going to happen at Jackrabbit's Palace. She talks about the dream of time and space. She tells him to watch and listen. Time and space are dimensions, so I don't know. I'm interested to see what you guys think about this. I haven't read any great theories about it to this point. I'll be looking into it some more though. So yeah, from there we cut to the Roadhouse and we get a musical outro and the episode ends. So there is a lot of stuff that happened here. Some of the main points that are, first of all, if you just skip the scene by scene, welcome to the video. But some of the main things are obviously Richard and Deputy Chad's conspiracy. It seems very strange that she had told the police about Richard and that they hadn't done anything yet. So we have to kind of guess that she probably told Chad and he covered it up. But then we have this letter, and there is a problem with what we've seen. The credits, the name in the credits for Miriam do not match the name on the letter that we saw. There's two different last names, but there's also to Sheriff Truman. So she said she sent the letter to Sheriff Truman, but did she mean Harry or Frank? And did she send it to the police station, or did she send it to Harry wherever he is? So there's a lot of stuff there. I did mention that she could or could not be dead based on what we saw. But either way, it doesn't seem like Richard is covering much up, and that's what we're supposed to take away from that. He's reckless. We don't know what's going on with the investigation about the hit and run. I mean, that is kind of bizarre that we haven't heard about that again, but something has to be coming in relation to all of this Richard Horne stuff. The Diane stuff is a big revelation, but I'm just not 100% sure we know what's going on as far as who she's in contact with and what Gordon sensed when she hugged him. I mean, obviously the most clear explanation would be that she is working with those guys, but, you know, her message said they have Bill Hastings, he's going to take them to the site. So what exactly at this point is the site? Is it where he met the Major? And if that's the case, why would it be relevant right at this moment? We haven't really heard Evil Coop talk about heading back in that way for anything. So, yeah, it's not really clear. I was reading a lot of stuff about all the different murder plots that have been hatched against Dougie since, you know, we now know that things are in motion for the Mitchums to take him out. But, like, basically since we saw the switch and Evil Coop has been inhabiting Dougie Jones's life, we have just seen a situation where there are people trying to kill his incompetent self at all times. Well, I guess we learned he's not 100% incompetent because he did stop Ike's attempt. But yeah, it's pretty crazy. I'm sure the Mitchums are going to have to move. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. I like those two characters. I hope we get a little bit more of them. The guy in the box, like I said, who's at the box with Evil Coop, I really don't know. Does this mean that Evil Coop set up the box, or does it mean that that guy set up the box and Evil Coop went there to visit? No real way to know. And it all brings us back to the idea of, what does Gordon actually know? You know, we found out quite a bit of stuff in the secret history about him knowing about listening post alpha and what was going on there. Basically all of Major Briggs's work, everything Blue Rose related. So how far ahead is he compared to us? Like, how much more does he actually know, and how is that going to play out? I'm really not sure. So let me know what you guys thought, what theories you're kicking around. Please like the video if you enjoyed it. As always, please subscribe to my channel. I'll be doing 10 things you might have missed. There was a couple things I left out here that because they're going to be in that, so I'm not completely oblivious, but I wanted, this video is long enough and I wanted to talk about some of those things a little bit more separately. Please follow me on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. I post regularly. I'm most easily accessible on Twitter. But as you know, I try to answer the comments as best I can as well. So that's it. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.